Again, I'd like to thank everyone for calling in to this week's Friday Freestyle Call, and our special guest is Brother Imam Shadid Muhammad. Just a brief bio on him. I had that he was born in Montclair, New Jersey, and he is a 2007 graduate from the Islamic University of Medina in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He holds a bachelor's degree from the College of Hadith, i.e. prophetic traditions, with a concentration in Hadith sciences. He has extensive experience in the field of dawah and translation. He has lectured at many masjids and colleges throughout the country, having translated for some of the most renowned Islamic scholars of our time. And also, if you visit his page on Facebook, it has further that he provides classes, seminars, marriage, family, community counseling, and lectures on a wide array of topics. All dissemination is based upon the Quran, the authentic Sunnah, and the methodology of the pious predecessors. He's also found in a great many places I'll speak on now and then reiterate towards the end. You are also able to find him on Twitter, and the addresses he can provide, on SoundCloud, on YouTube, on Facebook, and recently on Downtown Hot Radio with his own radio show. So with that being said, Brother Imam Shadid, welcome to the call. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your time with us this evening.
Well, thank you for allowing me the opportunity, and, I thank everybody for tuning in. I mean, I know it's Friday night, and people could have a ton of other things that they could be doing with their Friday night, but for whatever reason, they decided to join us. So, alhamdulillah, jazakumullahu khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you all with good. And hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, this can be an extension of some of the previous discussions that we've had. And hopefully, there'll be an opportunity for us to come to, an understanding. I think that we do part of why we run into so many conflicts is that we listen to respond instead of listening to understand. And I think that if we listened more to understand one another and to validate one another, you don't have to agree with someone, validate them. This is, marital counseling 101. If you want two spouses are butting heads, on an issue, the first thing to let down the wall to de-escalate the situation is the first thing to do is to validate the person. Say, I understand you. I may not necessarily agree with you, but I understand exactly where you're coming from. And once you do that, like the walls just completely come down because the person will only hear you when they know that you hear them, Hello?
Hello, I'm still here. You, myself, and Yusuf have the floor, so the only responses you will hear will be from us for now.
So you want me to just go ahead and just take off from here?
You can. And if I have a question that someone sends to me, we'll tap you on the shoulder and let you know that we have something for you. We have right now that you've joined the line about 32 people who are in with us.
Okay.
So inshallah, if I get something for you, I'll let you know. But yeah, go right ahead and have the floor, and I appreciate you again. Go ahead.
Okay. So in preparation for this, I like to itemize things so it makes it easier for us to navigate through the dialogue and that we're not just all over the place. It's, a couple of things that I want to talk about related to the two posts that were posted on my Facebook page the past couple of days that has created, unfortunately, an uproar. I think that a part of it, I think it was, just in good spirits. I think it was very healthy. It was very necessary. But there are some things that I really want to address here. First, let me just start by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He deserves to be praised, and sending the peace and blessings upon our final prophet and messenger, our example, our light, our role model, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The first thing that I want to say, and I want to just kind of follow me as I itemize everything, and these itemizing these things is in respect to the things that were posted on the page. Number one, is that it is very hard to remain in the balance of truth between the two extremes of exaggeration and just absolute neglect. It's very difficult to remain balanced, and I think that should always be our plight as Muslims. We should always try to remain balanced, whether we're angry, whether we're upset. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to supplicate, he used to say, Allahumma inni as'aluka kalimat al-haq fil ghadabi wal rida. Oh Allah, I ask you for the ability to say the truth, whether I am angry or whether I am happy. You know, whether I'm pleased with the person or whether I'm angry with the person, that no matter what my feelings are about a particular individual, that I ask you for the ability to always say the truth, right? And that's important. Mm-hmm. That's important because I looked at a lot of the posts, I looked at a lot of the comments, and there were only a few that I can say that were like really right up the middle. You know, big sister Naira Sabri, mashallah, she was probably one of the few people that I saw who her post was just like very up the middle, very, very fair on both ends of the spectrum. And, you know, big shout out to her, mashallah, tabarakallah. But, you know, and this is, you know, it's important that during dialogue, during heated discussions, that we always remain fair in our assessment and in our approach to the conversation. You know, you have people that went to one extreme or the other extreme. One extreme in, you know, defending and being dismissive of, you know, other people's, you know, other issues that were factored into the conversation. And you had others that were just completely self-centered. It's all about me, my rights, my this, my that. And it's, you know, it's important that we always remain balanced and listen to understand and not always listening to respond. Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, Sinfani min al-nasi la yastafi al-mutakabbir wal-mustahi. He said that there's two people that will never benefit from knowledge. There are two people that will never benefit from knowledge. And that the person that is shy because he's too timid, too scared to ask when he doesn't know, and the mustakbir, and the person who is arrogant because they think they know everything. So when a person opens their mouth and starts to speak, you're not listening to understand the person because you already know what they're talking about, right? And this happens in our marriages, you know, between husband and wife. You'll find that a lot of, you know, the couples that I've counseled, a lot of their problems stems from just not listening to one another. You're not listening to what she's saying, and she's not listening to what you're saying. You're both listening for the purpose of, you know, responding, as opposed to listening to just like really be in that moment with you and understand exactly where you're coming from. Because, you know, as our scholars used to say, you know, some of the professors used to say in the university, nisfal ijaba fahmu su'al, that the half of your answer is understanding the question. Half of your answer is in understanding the question. So if you spend more time trying to understand the question, that's half of your answer right there. You know, and the other half is, of course, you know, just you know, being able to put the knowledge where it needs to be. So, you know, those are two things that I just want to, you know, number one, being fair in our kalam, in our speech, in our discussions, and are always trying to maintain a balance. And even if you feel like you're inclining towards one side more than the other, then you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to ask, kalimatul haqq fil ghadabi wal rida, I ask you for the ability to say the truth, whether I'm angry or whether I'm pleased, right? Because sometimes we can be pleased with a person and we'll begin to flatter them and we'll, you know, exaggerate, you know, without being honest, without being fair. And number two is to learn how to listen to understand as opposed to listening to respond. Number three is that no one who speaks sincerely for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does so with the intention of offending someone. Like, you know, I've seen a lot of people jump on the post and say, I'm highly offended by this. And this was, you know, brothers and sisters, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I'm offended by this. This post was offensive, you know, and I mean, when you know me, when you've had a relationship with me for some time, and I don't mean like on a personal note, I mean like from my position as a leader in the Islamic community. From my position, you've had interaction with me, whether, you know, whether online or whether offline in the masajid, in the, you know, different, you know, arenas that I've frequented, you know me. My life is pretty much an open book. At least the area of my life that I want everybody to know. That is pretty much an open book. So, I mean, it doesn't take much for you to click on a couple of buttons on your laptop or on your phone to find out who Shadeed Muhammad is. And one thing that, I don't think that anyone would disagree with is that I at least try to be as balanced and as fair as possible, and my attempt to, remedy some of the problems in our communities has been nothing short of just being sincere and out of love. I mean, who does what I do except out of love? There's no money involved in this. There's nothing else involved except just an earnest desire to see people do better in their lives, in their religion, in their relationships with Allah, and their relationships with one another. That's just social services, period. When you're involved in social service, you do it because you love it, not because there's money involved or any other, perks that come along with it. As a matter of fact, myself and my family, we have received more harm from the Muslim community than the average individual. Everything from slander to backbiting to exposing, your faults and your mistakes. And, there was a time in my life where I had people that would just literally listen to every lecture that I did looking for little faults and mistakes. And, people have called me every name in the book, from being an apostate to being a kafir to being a non-Muslim to being a coon to being this and being that. I mean, I've I've heard it all. I mean, you don't get to where I am in my life right now except that you have to have thick skin. So, I mean, if you looked at it in terms of what is there to benefit, there's really nothing to benefit except, hoping that I can make a better place for myself in the hereafter. So I think that no one that speaks sincerely for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does so with the intention of offending someone. However, sometimes, truth can be offensive. Sometimes, we don't always choose the best words to convey what we want to say. Sometimes it comes off wrong, but when you know the person that is saying it, you make excuses for the wording and you understand their plight, and because you have a relationship with them. I mean, not every time the Prophet ﷺ addressed this community, it was in the best of terms. Sometimes he used very harsh wording, to address his companions, especially if it was something that he wanted to emphasize. I'll give you an example. Authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man ta'azza bi'aza al-jahiliyyah, فَأَعِدُّهُ بِهَنِي أَبِيهِ وَلَا تَكْنُوا." He said that if you find someone bragging about his social status from Jahiliyyah, from the pre-Islamic era, whether he was from this tribe or that tribe, if you find someone bragging about his social status, his pre-Islamic social status, then tell him to bite the head of his father's penis and don't sugarcoat it. That's an authentic hadith. That is offensive. And someone sitting there listening to that can say, whoa, wait a minute, how could he as a leader of the Islamic community, and I mean, that was some of the things that people were saying. It was like, how could he as an Islamic so-called leader, because our people, we're never going to give that to you. And that's part of our problem, that we don't want leadership. If you were to ask who is the leadership of the African-American Muslims in America, you probably would get some very few answers. You might get Farrakhan, you might get this one or that one, but there's no one person that we, on a collective level, would unify and say he is the leader of the Muslims, the African-American Muslims in America. You're not going to get that, simply because we don't want leadership. After Malcolm, Martin, and, some of the other, prominent leaders in the African-American community in the past, we decided that we weren't going to have any more leaders. We normally say that, other races made sure that we didn't have any other leaders, but we made sure we didn't have any other leaders. We made sure that we didn't have any other leaders. I mean, we were the ones that killed Malcolm. Make no mistake about that. So we made sure that we didn't have any other. And, I mean, that's part of the problem as well, because you go to any other ethnic group, you go to any other, culture, they have their leaders. And they don't always agree with them. They don't always, have as much respect for them as they should. But they do consider them their leaders. If you were to go to Arab Muslims right here in America and you were to ask them who are the leaders in the Arab community, Arab American community, they would run off names to you, Fulan and Fulan and Fulan. They will give it to you. But you go to African Americans and you ask them who their leaders are, we don't have no leaders. Why? Because we level everybody. We want everybody to be on the same level. So when you look at a figure like Shadeed Muhammad, you say, oh, he's a regular guy. What? Because he know Arabic? That don't make him, no better than me. We want to level everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and that's part of the problem because we don't respect leadership. I get people jump on a post that, as long as I'm saying something that coincides with your desires, it's all good. You'll like the post. You'll say, good job, man. But the moment I say something that goes against your desires, then it's like, oh, who is he talking to? Who is he and this and that? It's like that. Like just yesterday, we was cool. And the moment I say something to you that you disagree with, it's like everything changed. Everything changes. And it's similar.
Well, Brother Imam, I just want to interject that when I first had the opportunity to interview you, I was not very familiar. I had heard about you in different groups and heard people speak favorably of you, but when I actually went to research, and I posted this in the groups as well, what I found first was, and I'm hearing you say to everyone, you're well aware of the things that people have said and are saying. There were so many blogs and videos and articles and entire websites and Twitter pages where groups of people had collectively decided to structure your demise, and that made me a little nervous. I didn't know what was going on. However, I did go and listen to, I'm keeping it real, I actually went to YouTube and just listened to, because you want to be careful with whom you align yourself with. And I don't think that it's an accident that some of the things that are said are purposely done so that people don't align themselves with you because of how certain people feel. But when I did go to YouTube and listen myself, regarding an authenticity, funny. So I'm glad that everybody can hear that nobody's speaking, nobody's posting, nobody's saying these things, and it's a mystery, and they think they're getting away with some of the savagery of the words. It's and then just don't drink it. But to try to, verbally and virtually destroy somebody, it's a very sad thing to watch. That's just from my intake. But by all means, please go ahead.
Right. So, even so, and this was just one example. The Prophet ﷺ, there are many examples in his relationship with his companions, and none of his companions ever looked at it as, oh, that is offensive. I'm not following him anymore, and and I'm going to go find another leader and go, No, they understood that his position as the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the leader of his community, that sometimes it can get a bit frustrating dealing with people, and sometimes your words don't always come out in the best way, but you never intentionally mean to offend anybody. You know what I'm saying? I'm just speaking from my perspective, my opinion. You can, as long as, and I say all the time, as long as I don't quote an ayat or a hadith or any of the statements of the Salaf or the Sahaba, then it's just my opinion. You can take that or you can leave it. Scholars who have come, before me that are greater than I will ever be, have said, that if you find, like Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that if you find that my statement conflicts with the Quran and the Sunnah, then take my statement and throw it up against the wall. Every scholar who has come along has said that. Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said everybody's statement can either be accepted or rejected except the statement of the man in that grave, and he pointed to the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, as long as I'm just speaking, I'm venting about an issue or some experience that I've had with a particular issue, then you can either take it or you can leave it. Once I quote the ayat and the hadith and and I connect that to the issue, and you see the connection and the relevance of it, then at that point your issue is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not with me. So what I'm saying is that sometimes truth can be offensive. Sometimes the way that people say things, it could be, but the person, when you have husnul dhan, when you have a good opinion of the person, you always put the best construction on it, and that the person didn't intentionally mean to offend, right? Number 4, is I want to deal with the issue of feminism, and there is a feminist movement in Islam that is going out right now, and I mean, when I look back at some of the comments, it almost put me in a position where I felt like I was in a world by myself. Like, I didn't know what I was talking about. People was like, where is this going on? Where is this happening? I don't know anybody who does this, or I don't know anybody that does that. And going back, looking at some of the posts, I started to feel like, well, maybe I'm in a lane by myself. Maybe I am talking off my rocker. Maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? It's just like, we jump to the defense. Here again, listening to respond as opposed to listening to understand. But there is a feminist movement that is going on amongst Muslims right now. African Americans, we're kind of always the last to jump in on a movement. But the danger with African Americans is that when we jump in on a movement, we take it to the next level, because we always got to overcompensate for our inferiority amongst the other classes or the other cultures and ethnic groups out there. So we always got to overcompensate for that inferiority. So we'll take a concept and we'll take something that people have been doing for generations, but once it lands in the lap of the African Americans, we're going to take it and we're going to run with it, and we're going to outdo everybody. And maybe that's just part of our nature as African Americans. We just have so much zeal and so much passion with everything that we do. But when we take on an ideology, when we take on a movement and make it our own, because the feminist movement didn't start with African Americans. That wasn't our issue, so to say. That was an issue of the Eurocentric, Caucasians here in America that came from other places, that their women decided that they were tired of being repressed and oppressed, and begin with this movement. But along the journey of feminism, they have pulled other ethnicities in on that, that conversation. It has made it a global thing, when in fact, feminism, it really, really only seeks to benefit one particular group. And of course, that is the 1%. Make no mistake about that. Because when minorities get involved in feminism, you're already a minority. So you only marginalizing yourself even further, which is what I was saying to the women on the post, that when you start beating up on black men and you start saying that, some of the posts that I saw, subhanAllah, man, it just really opened up a can of worms. A drunk mind speaks a sober heart, man. And, sometimes, people can be so inundated with their own emotions and feelings and, pain. I wrote an article some time ago about how we speak from pain, and a lot of things that we do is just simply, motivated by pain, past experience.
So you had the sisters with their hijabs on kimars and knots. You did that.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking, because if nobody knew who you were before, that specific one about feminism was shared in so many groups and sparked off so many conversations. So if you could, you might want to elaborate a little bit more on what you were saying, because to some of the sisters, it almost was like, oh, so everything is our fault, so they can do whatever they want, and
Okay, I'm going to
be about it. So you break it down. Okay.
So
thank you.
So the thing with the feminism, what happens is, this movement has already started to spread. Like I said, it hasn't really reached the ranks of the African American Muslims on that level, but it's there. Dr. Amina Wadud, I don't know if everyone is familiar with her, but she was donned as the Islamic feminist. That is a new term that has been given to her. You have, many other women and then you have speech of women, maybe not necessarily in those terms of feminism, but the way that they speak is is along those lines. It's part of that conversation. And when you start to see women say things like, one of the posts I read, the sister said, well, tell these broke brothers to stay in a broke lane. Stop trying to marry sisters that's out of their league and out of their lane. And I mean, there may be some truth to that. It's just the language that you use. It just, no other ethnic group speaks about their men like African American women talk about their men. You're not going to find Arab women because of a bad experience or a bad experience in marriage or two bad experiences in marriages say, I ain't marrying no other Arab men anymore. But you have African-American women that do that. You have African-American sisters that will say, Muslims, I ain't marrying from African-Americans anymore. And when I put the post and said that, and I mean, it might have been exaggerated a little bit just to say that, African-American women have always, despised African-American men. But where I was going with that was that from the time of slavery, even we can go back to the period of slavery, there was a time when African-American men or African men were always powerless. We were always depicted as powerless in the eyes of African-American women. When you're seeing, your oppressor rape your woman and raise your babies in his home, these mulatto children being raised in the home. He raped your woman, had a baby by her, and the child, and the whole while you're out in the field, in the barn, seeing this happen, and the woman is looking at you like, when are you going to do something? And that hatred, that anger, that frustration has been, we have shared DNA. Stuff is passed down generation after generation. This stuff doesn't just go away. We never healed. We were released from physical bondage. But there was, just like any traumatic situation, when you go through trauma, you have to go through a period of healing to get past that. All right, we never had a healing period. We were released from slavery, and it's like off you go and go start your own, And I mean, throughout the years, we've had compounded trauma. I can just refer the listeners to a very powerful woman, very powerful speaker. She actually wrote a book. It's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, Dr. Joy DeGray. I believe she's out of D.C., but you can go to YouTube. Is about 32 videos or 30-something videos of a lecture that she gave. It was actually a thesis, I believe, that she wrote. It's in book form, but it's called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and she addressed this. Dr. Umar Johnson, he has a ton of videos on YouTube where he talks about this cycle of, just pain and hatred that we carry with us generation after generation after generation. So that is more so where I was going with it. And now it's just like African-American women, you just have another reason, more of another reason now with Islam, and you having all of these rights in Islam and the Muslim man not being able to give you your rights. It's like now you just have another reason to hate us, right? Because now and the thing is that it's so unfair. The argument is so one-sided. The brothers don't get a break. Since I graduated from the Islamic University in 2007, anyone knows the first class that I decided that I was going to tackle when I graduated and came back to America was marriage. I started teaching from Sahih Bukhari, the chapter of marriage from Sahih Bukhari. I taught the class in Amashad in Newark, New Jersey, which is the area where I'm from. It took me a year to cover that whole chapter. And the CD set came out to be like 48 CDs, right? And then once I became the imam in Philly, as a request from the sisters, I decided to do the class again at the sisters' class on Wednesdays when I was the imam of the United Muslim Masjid on 15th Street. And throughout the years, sisters know that I have been very hard but fair with the brothers. And nobody has ever stood up in defense of the brothers, and some of my language has been very harsh with the brothers. I've had brothers come to me and say, yo, you mad hard on the brothers. Like, yo, you don't let up on the brothers. Like, the vast majority, if I could say 80% or 85% of my lectures on marriage and families and things like that has been very hard on the brothers, very hard. And no one ever raised an eyebrow. But the moment I turn my attention towards the sisters, not for the purpose of making them victims. This is not pointing the finger. This is holding a mirror up and making people take responsibility for the part that they played in the mess that we have created. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam and Eve. And through those two, whatever problems in our families, it's because of two people. It is not because of one person. It's not because of one person, and I mean, I just think that, the brothers just, don't get their due of turning the attention towards the women and making them take ownership of the part that they played in making the situation. And that's not to dismiss and to say, I saw one post, one sister said, I would love to see imams address the misogyny and what's going on. And I was like, sister, you're unfair, because I have. I've written articles. I've written, ebooks on this stuff. Like, come on, that's not being fair. I've written a whole book on domestic violence and, the misogyny that the brothers, have, brought with them into Islam and how they're abusing this. Like, I've given lectures about probably one of the very few imams that Sunni imams. I mean, you have people, I don't know what goes on out beyond the Sunni circle. I don't really know. I kind of function in my little bubble. That's the way that I put blinders on and I go forward. I don't really have a lot of time to look and see what this one is doing, what that one is doing. I just know what I'm doing. I'm only responsible for what I do, right? So to sit here and say that I wish the imams would start addressing misogyny and addressing the oppression of the sisters, that's unfair, because I have. And it's just, it's like the moment you start to tap into or peel back a couple of layers and what the sisters are doing, it's just like now everybody wants to play victim. Everybody wants to, and that's normal. That's normal. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if I can give you an example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he went to the women one day. He used to address the women, on a normal basis. He used to have classes just for the women, which is where I got the concept from. When I started to do the sisters classes, when I was the imam, one of the sahabiyat, one of the women of the sahaba, they came to him and said, all of the men, they usurp all your time and they take all of your time. Why don't you make a day where you would just teach the women? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, okay, pick the day and the place and I'll come to you and I'll teach the women. And they picked the place or whatever, and he used to go there and he used to teach the women. And one of the things he said to the sisters on one occasion, he said, يا معشر النساء تصدقنا فإني رأيتكن أكثر أهل النار. He said, oh, you group of women, I encourage you to give sadaqah, to give charity, even from your gold, he said, because I saw the hellfire and I saw that the vast majority of the people in the hellfire were women. So one of the sahabiyat stood up and said, O Messenger of Allah, وَمَا لَنَا أَكْثَرَ أَهْلَ النَّارِ إِلَّا أَنَّنَا النِّسَاءِ. She said, why is it that we are the vast majority of the people in the hellfire? Is it because we're women? It's just jumping to the defense. Here again, that, bringing up that pre-Islamic misogynistic dynamic that existed in pre-Islam, Arab culture, that was there. So she automatically just, is it because we're women? The Prophet ﷺ said, no, not because you're women. It has nothing to do with the fact that you're women. But the vast majority of you are ungrateful to your husbands, and the vast majority of you curse your tongue. You curse your husbands. So that you curse, meaning not verbal abuse, but like saying, may Allah curse you. That was a common quote that our women would say back then, like, may Allah curse you, that this is something that we are forbidden from doing in Islam, to curse another Muslim. It's haram to do that. But he said that, you curse your husbands and you are ungrateful. He said the man can spend his whole life doing nothing but right by you, and the moment you see one thing wrong, here again, Shadid is as good as his last post, right? As long as I'm doing right by you, it's all good. The moment I do one thing wrong, you say to your husband, مَا رَأَيْتُ مِنْكَ خَيْرًا قَطْ, I have never known any good from you. It's dismissive. Like, you just dismiss all of the good the person has done. And that's haram in Islam. To dismiss all of the good that someone has done for you because of one mistake, that's unfair. It's unjust. Right? So what I'm saying is that no brother is getting off the hook, not getting off the hook. But what we are doing is we're holding a mirror up to the women, because the situation that we are in right now with these serial marriages, these exaggerated levels of divorce, these children, misplaced children all over the place, these children in the Islamic community where, the fathers and mothers are not there together raising these children, and the mothers are literally, from the outside looking in, it's like, wow, the brothers need to get their act together. But the sisters need to get their act together too, absolutely. This is a two-way street. And, to be honest with you, with all of these high standards, I saw a lot of posts about sisters talking about how high their standards were. So should we just lower our standards or whatever the case? No, nobody's telling you to lower your standards. Keep your standards exactly where they are. And then tell me how that has worked out for you. But what I'm saying is that these men that you are criticizing, that you are, almost borderline condemning, right, for being no good and being this and being that, and they need to man up. I saw all of these posts about brothers need to man up and brothers need to live up to the standards that Allah has set from them and X, Y, Z. Frederick Douglass, he made a very profound statement. He said, and we're all familiar with this quote, he said, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Right? I want to elaborate on that a little bit, because what we're dealing with is broken men. Sisters need to understand something. With all those heights and high expectations, when did these brothers ever have an opportunity to, be raised in an environment by which they would be able to live up to those standards? Please tell me. We come from broken homes. I'm going to speak about myself personally. And I know that there are a lot of brothers that can relate to what I'm talking about, right? We're talking about, I grew up in a foster home. I didn't have my biological mother, my biological father with me. My mother was incarcerated. I didn't meet my father until I was 7 years old. You understand what I'm saying? Like, who taught me how to be a man? So now, once I become an adult, victim of my own circumstances, right? Once I become an adult, I'm 18, 19, I run into this woman who, may have come from a similar situation, but this society has always catered to the women. Black men in this society right here can't get a break. We can't get a break because for women, you have Section 8, you have welfare, you have WIC, you have SNAP, you have all of these different programs. Obama came into office, made it possible for single women to go back to college, all types of grants that are available, right? The moment the black male gets a felony, he doesn't qualify for any of that. Felony. And a felony can be something as simple as being caught with a bag of weed within 1,000 feet of a school zone. That's enough to get you a felony. That's enough to get you a felony. So right now, I have a felony right now. It's very difficult for me to put anything in my name at this point. I'm really left for my or my wives, all right, because I don't shy away from that. Yes, I am in polygyny. I don't shy away from that. I advocate that, and I have no shame about that. That's a marital institution that was legislated by the Sharia, by the legislation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the hypocrisy with many Muslims is that we'll advocate for the LGBT community, we'll advocate for gay rights, we'll advocate for women to marry another woman and a man to marry another man, and that's their right, that's their God-given right, they're human beings, and we still have, and all of the other rhetoric that we spew when it comes to those issues, but let polygyny be brought to the table, and it's almost as if we're ready to crucify you. No, it's hypocritical. As Muslims, we need to take responsibility for that. Nonetheless, the point that I'm making is that it's very hard for me to get things in my name with a felony. With a felony. I just went to Canada last Saturday for a conference, right? And I had to go through immigration at the airport. And the immigration officer just decided at this point to run a background check on me. And once he ran my background check, I was on a plane less than 24 hours back to America. They would not even admit me into Canada simply because I have a felony. So, it's important that sisters, be aware of the with all of these high standards and high expectations that you have of all of these men. I'm trying to figure out, where was these men raised? that they are going to live up to these high standards and expectations. Now, this is not giving the brothers a pass to just be lazy and do nothing. That's not what I'm talking about, because you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you can change your condition. You can. I'm living proof that can be done. I'm living proof to anyone that has ever been incarcerated or in trouble with the law that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can change your condition. Individually, you can change your condition. So that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that as we begin to look at the men in our community through this lens of perfection, I'm trying to figure out, like, where do you think these men came from? In my journey as an imam, within the past, I would say since 2002, right, all the way up until these very moments that I'm uttering these words, I've come across Muslim men who have shared with me that they were molested. Muslim men that have been molested. So you want to know why, these brothers are misogynistic? You want to know why these brothers are, as Sister Aaliyah Kabir used the term, baby boy, this baby boy syndrome. They were raised by single mothers. There were no men in these homes. If you were to gather, these brothers in our communities, and you were to do a poll to see how many of these brothers and sisters have been raised in healthy environments, dual parenting environments, wherein they saw love in their households, in their immediate environment, what will be the actual percentage if we were to do that? Very few. I had a conversation with a brother about the same thing yesterday, and he asked me, he said, well, Shadid, you've been married for a while, and, you seem like a good father, a good husband or whatever. How did you manage? Like, where did you learn how to be a father? Where did you learn how to be a husband? Like, where did that come from? I said, that came from, number one, a personal initiative within myself. And everybody don't have that zeal. And that's where you women come into play. A man will be as good as the standards that you set for him, but you also have to help him achieve those standards. You can't set the standard, set the bar high, and say, okay, now you need to find your way up that ladder and meet those standards. The man is always going to turn to his woman for that support to help him. When the Prophet ﷺ first received revelation from Allah, and Angel Jibril came to him, and he saw Angel Jibril for the first time, he ran home to who? He ran home to Khadijah. The man is always going to run to that woman. He's not looking for a free ride. But when you're looking at a man that is broken, that comes from a society where, he carries so much on his shoulders, and then, to come to this woman and she's like, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. It's never good enough. And as I said, but when you marry a man from another culture, no matter what he gives, it's always good enough. But your man, African-American men, it's never good enough. The matter is that you have some sisters out there that, I used to be a barber, so I remember working at a barbershop one time, and I remember, conversation coming up, and the woman, she says, I couldn't have a good man because I would run all over him. I couldn't have a good man. And Dr. Omar Johnson, he talked a little bit about that on one of his videos on YouTube. He said, some women have this, this mentality that, they believe, they accept inferior standards and substandard, standards. They accept that for themselves. But what they do is they marry men or they date men that they know is going to treat them like crap, so they don't have to take responsibility for the mentalities that they carry. So they blame it on the man. They make poor choices in men, in spouses, and then when the man does them dirty, they turn around and say, yeah, well, it's his fault. But you were the one that married him. When you look at the sisters with standards and high expectations, a lot of them are single women. Most of the women that are making those comments, these are single women. You're single. Number one. Number two, you have children. Most of them have children. There's a specific profile. In my experience, there's a profile. And one of the brothers, he hit it head on. He said, you have a group of sisters that are in their mid-30s, mid to late 30s, Most of them are single. Most of them have children from previous marriages. And these women, they roam in the community and they just bitter. They bitter. And they literally begin to impose that bitterness on the other, relationships in the community. And the relationships are already tense. They're already crumbling. And all it takes is for one bitter person to come along and say, I wouldn't tolerate that. You need to raise your standards. And it's funny you say you need to raise your standards and your expectations and you're single and you're telling this to a woman who's married, right? MashaAllah, tabarakallah. So, my point with the segueing into the lesbianism and the feminism, if we continue down this path where we are beating these men up, we have very little compassion for them. We have very little understanding of their condition, their psychological condition, their social condition, which has contributed to their financial condition and their religious, their spiritual condition. All of those things are interconnected. You can't separate one from the other. Dr. Umar Johnson talked about, how, a lot of he's a psychologist by trade, by profession, and he said that in his profession, in his experience, that he has not come across one case of an African-American male or female who is homosexual or a lesbian, except that they had some form of trauma in their early childhood that exposed them to that. He said, and so while we laugh at them and we call them names, and he said, but keep in mind that African-American homosexuals and lesbians have the highest rate of suicide amongst the LGBT community. They have the highest rate. So, I'm saying that to say that, we have people walking around, even in the Muslim community, because we don't have professionals working with hand in hand with the imams to kind of diagnose some of these problems that are beyond just you don't want to follow the Quran and the Sunnah. I hope no one out there believes that the brothers that there's a small portion of brothers who literally just don't want to do the right thing. That there's a small portion of brothers out there that just don't want to do the right thing, and they have to find their way. Some of them will learn, and some of them will never learn. That's just the bottom line. But I would say, just being fair, that the vast majority of brothers that are out there, they really want to do the right thing. They really do. But you got to factor in all of the issues, that psychological issue, mental issues, family issues. You got to factor in all of these things. What is making these men not step up to the plate? It's not simply that they just deadbeats and they came out the womb like that. That didn't happen. These men didn't just jump off of Mars, just deadbeats. They don't want to do any good. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. I don't accept that. I interact with these men on a regular basis, and I know if given the right circumstances, these individuals can become great. They can become great. I mean, I've matched people up in my time, during my tenure as the imam. I've matched brothers and sisters up who would have probably never made that connection on their own. But because it came from me, people were more accepting of it. So I'll come to a brother and I'll say, hey, listen, what do you think about that sister? Right? The brother might say, well, she's a little overweight for me, but I don't. And then I go to the sister and I say, listen, what do you think about the brother right here? Well, I need to check and see how much money he makes or whatever the case. Listen, miss me with all of that. Let's sit down and let's talk. And then find out that they are compatible, find out that, after 3-4 years, they're still happily married, still having children, still working together. You know what I mean? Like, that happens. But, it has to be the right circumstances. Part of the reason why our marital situation is because of poor leadership. The leadership takes part responsibility of that. Absolutely. Because men are accepting Islam, and what are they seeing? Are they seeing their imams, many of the imams in the communities, imams that I know personally, their wives and their children don't come to the masjid. How are you servicing a community and your own family is not interacting with the community? You have, imams who, their wives, sit on this high horse from this position of privilege that I'm married to the imam, so I don't need to involve myself in, layman affairs, so to say. Not necessarily in those words, but that's the attitude throughout the years. And I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, his wives interacted with the community. He interacted with the community. I mean, his life was an open book. We have documented evidence of him and his family interacting with the community. You know, he made marriage look beautiful. He beautified marriage. He made being a man to his family. He made comments to the men in the community like, the best of you are those who are best to their wives, and I'm the best of you men to my wives. That was a challenge to you. That was a challenge to the men in the community. Whereas today, these things are just kind of like, you know, we don't even talk about those things. And my job is to spark dialogue. I'm controversial by nature simply because I don't dance to nobody else's beat. I don't dance to nobody else's drum. I function in my own bubble. I travel my own path. And as a leader, I don't wait for people to make consensus on the decisions that I make. I make my own consensus. Like it who like it, don't like it who don't like it. That's just who I am. But that's being like that, you are going to be controversial. I don't intentionally try to be controversial. That's just me. That's just my nature. That's just the atmosphere that surrounds me. But also, I'm just tired, you know, as a Christian coming into Islam, converting to Islam, I'm just tired of seeing cliche khutbahs, the same cliche advices that we give to the brothers, just be patient. No, you're not just being patient. What's the solution? Let's find a solution. Hardly ever, as any brother or sister can tell you that has come to me with a marital issue, that I have ever said, be patient. That's not my forte. I don't give advice like that. I want to see solutions. I'm solution oriented. I want to see solutions. Right now, as a community, I want to see results. And I believe that those results can come about when we take off these masks, you know, and stop trying to put up this image, this facade that everything is perfect, and we put our, you know, mistakes, our flaws, our hurt, our pain, we put all of that stuff on the table, and let's pick it out one by one, and let's deal with each individual situation. We don't have a lot of time. I mean, I don't know what people are waiting for.
Did you get compensated good?
So, with that being said, that's pretty much, where I was going with the post. Hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, that brought some clarity to it. Mind you, again, maybe the wording wasn't the best wording. But, you know, sometimes when you know a person, you know what they were trying to say, you know, and you give them a pass on that. Sometimes, as Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala said, sometimes the tongue may utter what the heart didn't intend. You know, sometimes we intend one thing and the way that it comes out is another way. But we are hoping that the Muslims, because of this husnul dhan, because of these good opinions and good thoughts and the lack of suspicion that we have with one another, that we always put the best construction in. We say, oh, I know what the person was trying to say. It's like the hadith of the man who lost his camel and had all of his valuables on it, and then he found the camel later on, and he screamed out loud out of just happiness. He said, Allahumma anta abdi wa ana rabbuk. You know, oh Allah, you are my slave and I'm your Lord. You know, he made a mistake out of just being happy, but that is an indication that sometimes, you know, the tongue could utter what the heart didn't intend. So sometimes the wording might not be, as good as it could have been. We should always try to, choose the best words when we want to articulate a point. But sometimes it doesn't. We're human beings. Sometimes it doesn't always come off like that. But when you know the person that's speaking, you say, oh, I know he didn't mean it like that. I know what he meant because I know him. But we don't give each other that. We don't give each other that. I could pray next to you yesterday, and today I could utter something, wrong, and I won't even get the benefit of the doubt. That's just where we are today. So hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, people can see, where I was trying to go with that. You can agree with it, not agree with it, whatever the case may be. I know that there was a lot that came out of those posts, and alhamdulillah, it really gave me some fuel for some future khutbahs and lectures and seminars and writings, inshallah ta'ala, in the near future.
Inshallah. Okay, I didn't want to interrupt you. Were there any other points that you wanted to touch on before I start addressing just a few of the questions that were sent in?
No, that was pretty much it. I mean, I mean, I did my part. I mean, I could talk until tomorrow and trying to explain exactly what I meant and each point by point. There were so many different points, but that's pretty much the gist of it.
Okay. And again, I want to thank you for your time before I go into just a few of the questions that we have here. And I'd like to thank everyone else who has called in and is listening to this week's Friday Freestyle Call with Brother Imam Shadid Muhammad. One question that was brought up just in your last conversation that was posted in one of the groups was about the situation with black men and to be patient with them. And they were saying that, saying that the men have been molested or downtrodden. That's basically been our case for a very long time. Why is it something that we should have patience with now? Why is that being offered as an excuse for the condition of men today?
Well, I mean, personally, you don't have to be patient with anything. I'm not trying to take that away from anybody. I mean, your standards are your standards. I mean, I don't know what your journey was. You know what I'm saying? Like, your journey might have been difficult, and then you got to a place in your life where you become comfortable with who you are, and you're not trying to go backwards. You know what I mean? You that's where you are, and the person can either come into your life and, accommodate you where you are and help you to move forward, or stay out of your life. That's a personal decision. You know what I mean? Like, I can't tell you that you have to be patient with that. I'm just saying, as a community, as a leader in the Islamic community, I'm speaking from angles where many of the brothers, many of the sisters may not be privy to. You might not be privy to the man that you are laying next to every night has had some because a lot of times people get married. I mean, we weren't doing premarital counseling. Premarital counseling was unheard of, in many, African-American Muslim communities. I know I've been around long enough and have frequented many communities, many mosques, many communities, and I know I always ask the imam, what is your marital situation like here? Do you do premarital counseling or whatever the case may be? And you will find for the vast majority, there's no premarital counseling, which means that people are basically courting on their own, which, here again, is another, part of the part of that, the onus of the responsibility is on the women as well, because no man can marry you without your consent. Disturbed by these marriages, these brothers coming into your lives, and but you let them in your life, because nobody can marry you. A woman cannot get married Islamically without your consent. And quite frankly, a lot of the sisters are married without wali. You're courting with the brother, you're meeting with the brother, you're having conversations with the brother, you're talking on the phone, chatting, sexting and texting and things like this, and then decide that, we can't keep living in the haram, let's go get married. And then, you see all of these problems starting to manifest, with this man, but you never really took the time out to doubt, what was his family life like? What was his upbringing? Did he grow up with both parents? Was he molested as a child? Was he physically abused as a child? What's the deal? We don't ask those type of questions. We might be a little more privy to it now simply because, I think that conversation has started, because of so much drama that has happened. But I remember back in the early 2000s, man, people were getting married, like after one or two sit-downs. I mean, this ain't just, in the Salafi community. This is, this was across the board. People are having one or two sit-downs and, and I mean, I've always had a problem with the whole process, the way that process went, which is why I started giving classes on these things and, just really trying to change our mentality and our whole approach to getting married. But you don't have to change your standards. You don't have to be patient with anything. If you decide in your own personal life that I am at a good place, I'm in a good space right now in my life, and I'm not going backwards, then you have that right not to lower your standards and not to accept excuse. I'm saying I have to accept patience as an excuse. The Prophet ﷺ dwelled amongst his community for 23 years. And a little bit before his demise, there was an incident that happened between two companions, right? One companion was an Arab. The other one was a black man who originally came from Ethiopia. And one companion got angry at the other one, and he said, "You are the son of a black woman." You're the son of a black woman. And when that companion, was offended by that comment, he went and he told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet called that companion over and he said, did you insult this man? He said, yes. He said, did you insult his mother? He said, yes. He said, then you are an individual who still has traits of the pre-Islamic era with you, traits of Jahiliyyah in you. He said, O Messenger of Allah, even at this stage in my deen, meaning I've accepted Islam and been Muslim all of these years, are you still going to put that on me? He said, absolutely, yes. Even right now, after being Muslim for all of these years, you still have traits of Jahiliyyah, showing you that simply because a person is Muslim, a person takes Shahada, that doesn't erase his past experience. Taking Shahada does not mean that your past experience is all erased and now you are on par with the rest of the Muslim world and you have honor and dignity. Nah, that's earned. That is earned. That's earned through the footwork, putting in the work. But, I, as a Muslim leader, I have to, when I look at the men in the community, I have to look at them with both eyes. I can't look at them and say, I'm holding you accountable to the standards and the expectations of the religion of Islam without looking at where you came from, your why. Everybody, I talked about that before, everybody has a why. And you got to, you're not responsible as a woman. You are not responsible to look into every man's why in the community. That's not your responsibility, but that is mine. If I want to be an effective leader, if I want to be able to get to the core of people, get to the hearts of the men that are in the community, I have to consider that. So you don't have to, accept patience as an excuse. You don't have to do that. You can keep your standards exactly where it is, and, if the men don't meet that standard, then you just make reservations to be single for the rest of your life. But I, on the other hand, I have to consider that.
Okay, all right. And thank you for that answer. And I know I mentioned earlier that we were going to keep you only from 9:30 to 10:30, possibly till 11.
Oh, I'm here.
So I'm going to try to. Okay, inshallah. I'm going to work these questions in. All right, the next one that I had was when you were speaking earlier on feminism. And one sister sent a question asking you to speak on the female imam masjid situation as an extension of feminism and what Islam has to say about it.
Yes, I'm actually writing about that in my book. I have a book that will probably be released probably sometime in December or January. And I did a long chapter on that issue. Yes, absolutely. I think it is definitely connected to feminism, without a doubt. I think that, the reason that, at least the reason we were told, right, the reason that we were told that this particular first all-females mosque was established was because the women needed a safe space, right? And they needed a place where they could be recognized and stop accepting substandard, treatment in many of the different mosques. A part of me does agree with that. I've been to many mosques, and I've seen the sisters' areas in many of these mosques. I'm very keen. I always travel with my family, whether one wife or the other, and I'm always curious to know what the sisters' area in that masjid looks like. And I can tell you, throughout my years and throughout my travels, I have seen some masjids, and the sisters' areas are literally deplorable. It's sad, And so, a part of me, I do understand. And here again, listening to understand and not listening to respond, I do understand. Do I agree that there's a need for an all-females mosque? No, I don't. Absolutely not. I think that it was an opportunity for the women as well as the men who felt like, because women, you're not in that fight by yourself. There are men such as myself and many other men who feel like you guys are in your right to have a place that is designed for you. I mean, the whole concept of the minbar came from a woman. One of the sahabiyat, one of the female companions came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, O Messenger of Allah, during the Jumu'ah, right, the women were always in the back. So if there are, maybe 2,000-3,000 companions, the Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't standing on a minbar, so a place that was elevated. So being level with everybody else sitting on the ground, it was hard for the women in the back to see him. So one of the women came and said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, I have, one of my male servants, one of my main servants, he's a carpenter. Would you like if I can get him to make you a minbar that you can stand on so the women can see you in the Jumu'ah?" And the Prophet ﷺ said, yes. And when that minbar was built, it had 3 steps. Khutbah on that minbar. He gave his first khutbah on that minbar, the tree trunk that he used to lean up against before the minbar was built. He used to lean against a tree trunk. When the Prophet ﷺ gave his first khutbah on that minbar, the tree trunk began to cry during Jumu'ah, subhanAllah. The tree trunk began to cry, weep. The Prophet ﷺ had to stop the Jumu'ah, get down off of the minbar, and go over to the tree trunk that was weeping, that was whining and crying, and begin to console it. SubhanAllah Azim. And this is a minbar, a concept that came from the women in the community that today they don't even get the benefit from, simply because they're in some box in some remote corner of the masjid where they can't even see the imam. So yes, I do feel like they do have a wajh. They do have, they do have that in their favor, absolutely. But they are not the only ones that feel like that. So you have literally now isolated yourself even from the men in the community who feel like you on to something and that we support you. So now you go in feminism, the whole concept of feminism is that you are fighting one extreme with the other. You're fighting misogyny with feminism. And when you fight fire with fire, usually you end up with ashes. I don't really know much that can come out of fighting fire with fire. So yes, it is along those lines of, feminism creeping into our community, and we've accepted that. Why would you marry a man? I mean, just think about the absurdity of this. You're going to have a female call the adhan, a female give the khutbah, and a female lead the salah, right? This is what you're going to have, and you're going to pray behind this female imama. But then you go home and you pray in your house behind your husband. I mean, why do we have a problem with men being the leader and the forerunners in the community? The Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a very clear verse in the Quran, he said that we have never sent a messenger except from amongst the men. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا رِجَالًا نُوحِي إِلَيْهِ فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. That we have never sent a messenger before, except that he came from the male species. Ask the people of the scriptures that came before you if you have no knowledge about this. This is their rightful place. Just like the woman's rightful place is to be taken care of, to be, given food, shelter, clothing, and all of the rights that the women claim they deserve, that is your position. I saw one post, one sister said, don't try to take away what Allah has given us. Yes, Allah has given you that. So don't try, on the other hand, try to take away something that Allah has given us as men. That is our rightful place. So, I mean, you can't lower the status of the one whom Allah gave a high status to raise up the status of a woman who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave a separate status to. You're making someone who Allah made superior inferior to give someone else a superior or put them on par. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave every one of us our place. Gave every one of us our place. There were women scholars in Islam, past and present. There were women teachers. There were women educators. There were women who even went out on the battlefield with the Prophet ﷺ and fought jihad. There were women that went out and fought. You know what I mean? There were women who died fighting, trying to protect the Prophet. I mean, these things exist. I mean, so we allow, people to come in and say, Muslim women are being oppressed or whatever, and then we accept that. There's no need. One sister posted today, and it was a very, very poignant, comment, and that was that there's no need for feminism in Islam, because feminism means basically is saying that women have to fight for rights that haven't been given to them. So basically you're saying that either the Sharia, the legislation of Islam, actually didn't give you these rights, or you're saying that, there's something more that you actually seek beyond the rights that Islam has already given you. But women don't have to fight for rights in Islam. Your fight right now is to make the men in the ummah recognize the rights that Allah already gave you. That's your fight. Your fight is not to have, gender equality, because you have that. Your fight is not now to, have rights in Islam, because you have that. Your fight now is to make the men in the ummah who have co-opted, the religion for their own personal, whether in other countries, to make them acknowledge and recognize the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you and hold them accountable to that. That's it.
Okay.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Well, all right, I apologize. Thank you so very much for that thorough elaboration. At this time, I would like to introduce my co-moderator, Yusuf Abdul-Jalil, and he had a couple of questions for you as well.
Okay.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. This is Yusuf.
Wa alaikum salam.
I have a question, and it was something that I posed earlier on in the week, and basically it dealt with this. Is there a such thing as marital rape from an Islamic standpoint?
I'm going to pass on that question.
Okay.
It's a good question, though. It's a good question, though. But I just choose not to answer that at this point.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Wise man. Kim, you have any other questions?
Yes, I had one question that was rather light, and a sister had emailed it to me earlier. She just wanted to know if you plan on organizing a marriage fair regarding your no single zone post that you had on your page recently.
Yes and no. I mean, there are so many things. I mean, like the position that I'm in right now, like I'm not like an imam of a community or anything. I pretty much am a freelance speaker at this point. I mean, I pretty much enjoy that. But the downside to that is that I'm just kind of empowering people with information, but I'm not really building a lot, as opposed to having a stationed place, a mosque or whatever, and being able to be there on a constant basis. People need consistency. That's how you build anything, just being there. The consistency is there. I'm not able really to build anything. I mean, I personally don't believe that I would be in a position to be an imam at this point unless it was a place that I built from the ground or was a building that I, pretty much owned on my own, because, with the mentality that I have, it's always going to be a headbutt, with these administrations and these, board members who, are operating in the 21st century with, 15th, 16th century mentalities. You know what I mean? It's just really hard. It's really hard. That's a dilemma that we have in our time today, So as far as organizing a marriage fair, the thing about organizing a marriage fair is that you always have an influx of women and very few men, simply because the men haven't been accustomed to going through a formal, structured format in terms of getting married. They have always been, just basically see a sister, exchange numbers, talk to her on the phone, and then, just decide, hey, we're going to get married, and that's pretty much how it has been going for, the past, 15, 20 years, or since I've been a Muslim. I've never really seen or been to a mosque where there was an actual structure, premarital counseling and, meeting of the families and, paperwork and things. I've really never seen that type of structure, so brothers haven't been accustomed to doing that. So when we start talking about marriage fairs and brothers bring your applications, sisters show up with your walis or whatever, you're going to always have the sisters that are, sisters are very transparent. They don't really have a lot to hide. They're very transparent. They want to be married. They want to be, someone's wife. But the men is just like, they don't want nobody looking into their finances. They, it's a very touchy, situation, very delicate situation dealing with the brothers. And until we can get them accustomed to this is the way that things should be done, you're going to always, have that. What we're doing right now, we basically pioneering and ushering in a new, understanding or a new approach to Islam, and that's always going to be an uphill battle, so sisters just have to be patient, but I definitely will, try to collaborate with some of the people that work with me in my corner to try to see if we can get another marriage fair. And if there's any brothers, that are on the line that are looking to get married, whether in monogamy or in polygyny, man, reach out to me, man. Reach out to me, whether through Facebook, through my, my public email, imamshadidmuhammad@gmail. Reach out to me, man. There's always, connections that can be made. And, for brothers and sisters never to give up. Like the situations that we talked about on Facebook, most of them, as some of the sisters pointed out, these are minorities. These are minority situations. I think the vast majority of the brothers and sisters in the community, they really want good. They really want good. I heard people say, well, that's a very broad statement. The statements are supposed to be broad. You want me to bring specifics? I'm always going to speak in general, and, always going to, whether I address a minority problem or a majority problem. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a minority. The problem still exists and it still needs to be addressed. And another thing people have to stop doing is, stop getting on people's Facebook pages dictating to them what they can talk about and what they can't talk about. If you get on my page and there's something on it that you don't like, then unfollow me and go jump on somebody else's page. I mean, or you can send me a personal message saying, Brother Imam, I'm trying to really understand your post and where you're going with it. Could you please explain it to me because I'm having mixed feelings about it? Boom, and give me an opportunity to explain to you. But, you get people talking, and one thing I want the brothers and sisters to understand, right? You're not going to pigeonhole me with a religion while you just do you. If you clap at me, I'm going to clap back, and you're not going to like it. I'm letting you know right now. So if you go on my page and you post something inappropriate, something, calling me out or whatever, I'm still going to stay within the guidelines of Islam because I have to. This is my deen. I have to. But if you clap at me, I'm going to clap back, and you're not going to like it. So, be respectful. I want you to all understand something. I've been through this before 100 times. Go back and read The Elephant in the Room, part 1, 2, and 3, and understand who you're dealing with. I will clap back. And you're not going to say, oh, he's supposed to be an imam, and, this is what leadership does. Absolutely. If you disrespect me, I have non-Muslim family members. My biological sisters, they follow my page. My aunt follows my page. You have another sister hit me from Philadelphia and said her aunt, who is a non-Muslim, follows the page because she wanted to learn more about polygyny or whatever. You have non-Muslims that follow my page. So if you get on my page and you talk crazy, I'm going to put you in your place and you're not going to like it. So be respectful. You have, full range to express yourself. This is not, limiting you to expressing yourself, but you will express yourself within the guidelines of the Quran and the Sunnah, and that's to be respectful and to treat people like you want to be treated. But if you clap at me, better believe I have every right to clap back at you, and you're not going to like it. And you can say, well, is that the behavior of an imam? And you're not going to pigeonhole me with the deen. I know my deen, and I know what leverage I have in the religion and how to use that. So you're never going to use that to make me feel bad or make me feel ashamed. I'm sorry, that doesn't work on me. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that if you are harmed, then you respond back with an equal amount of harm that was given to you, and fear Allah, meaning stay within the boundaries. So I have that at my beck. I have that. If I choose not to use it, then consider me being compassionate to you. But if I use it, don't be offended because I'm in my right to use it.
All righty. I think we got the gist of that message, but it's always encouraging to hear your passion in what you're trying to do for everyone. It looks like I just have one last question for you. If anyone else had a question, you could forward them to me at Kimberly Kalima Songstress, or you could also post it on there's a post specifically for the questions tonight on Imam Shadid's page, Shadid Muhammad /Rada admin. It came from a sister while you were speaking previously. It's in 3 parts. I'm going to try to meld it together. And it's basically regarding the relationships and women being patient and holding on while we wait for the men to get where they need to be, some men, because some are good. Her question was, how can women be expected to heal men who don't seem to fully turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and al-Islam to be healed? If Allah says that he will not change the condition of a people until they first change what is bothering themselves, and he says no one can help those he leads astray, how then can we help people who aren't making more strides than excuses, as it seems? Because you can destroy yourself trying to believe in someone who refuses to change their own self.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to answer that from two angles. One is, don't fall in love with someone who has the potential to be a good husband. Fall in love with someone who is a good husband. I think a lot of times sisters look at a brother and say, oh, I can make him be this and I can make him be that. And understand something. People don't change. People don't change. Whoever you marry, that is who you marry. Don't complain about that later on and say, well, I'm trying to help him change. He doesn't want to change. Sorry to, bust your bubble. People don't change. Your perception of people is what changes, and that is what allows you to kind of continue loving them despite the fact that they have those mistakes and those flaws with them. Your perception, people don't change. So if you are marrying somebody with the hopes that they will change and become this or become that, then you are only, you hustling backwards. That's you hustling backwards. So don't fall in love with someone because they have the potential to be a good spouse. Fall in love with someone who is a good spouse from the very beginning. From the very beginning. All right? As it relates to, people, wanting to change their condition, I mean, I think that starts with the leadership. The leadership. If we're coming to Jumu'ah every Friday and we're hearing a consistent message of change, preaching, correct yourself, preaching, self-reflection, preaching introspection, and we come into Jumu'ah every Friday, and we're coming to classes throughout the week, and the imam is consistent in his message, this is what will affect change. And then, of course, he's getting it from his home, and then, of course, he's surrounded by, I was just talking to a brother earlier, married couples have to stay in touch with married couples. You can't be married and you hanging out with single people. That's part of the brother's biggest problem. They're married, trying to do the right thing by their wives, but 90% of your friends are single. That is going to have an impact. And I just did, a radio interview about, how single people, kind of have a negative impact on the community, on the healthiness of the community, because they come with a different, they come with a different dynamic. Single people, they're not lowering their gaze. Every other conversation is about marriage. They might even be involved in some haram relationships or whatever the case may be. And you married man trying to do the right thing, you're being exposed to this stuff. And the same thing applies to the sisters. So I think that, in trying to get the brothers to get on the right, it starts from the top and works its way down. It doesn't start from, sister, you on the ground level with your spouse or with these men trying to make them do better. It doesn't start from the ground up. It starts from the top down. It starts from the leadership working its way down. And I mean, we in, post-traumatic, transition syndrome, because we're transitioning. We're moving into a different era. We're moving into a different, a different dynamic. And I would say we're probably within the next 10 years, man, Islam is going to be, it's going to be a whole different approach to, practicing Islam here in America. That may not necessarily be good. It may not necessarily be bad, but it will definitely be different. It will definitely be different, So I just think that, right now we just got to do what we can. I mean, as long as I'm here, as long as I'm breathing, as long as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow me to open my eyes every morning and I get up, my plight will always be to help change the condition. And I think that things are changing. Things are changing for the better. I had a conversation with a brother on the day of the Eid, and we were just, in Philadelphia, and we were just looking out at the park and looking at the people and things, and we're seeing people who would have never showed up to the Eid before. We're seeing, sisters, who used to wear all black and niqab and gloves, and now, they're wearing a little more color. Still might be wearing niqab, but it's not as extreme. It's not as intense as it was maybe 5 to 10 years ago, and things are changing for the better. Have to be patient. And we have to, always keep in mind that Islam is going to be dominant. There's nothing, no one, no circumstance, the shaitan, the Illuminati, whatever you believe, nothing is going to impact the religion of Islam other than the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants it to go. Allah is in control. The wheel is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands, and He is steering this religion the exact way that He wants it to be. And, all of our frustrations is really unnecessary. Just turn it over to Allah and just do your part. Turn it over to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do your part. And don't get frustrated, because a lot of the problems that, marital couples, sometimes couples that are married, a lot of times they over-exaggerate the problems that are in their marriages. Some of this stuff is just normal. It's normal. It's okay. It's okay. You know what I mean? When, I started seeing some of the posts or whatever the case, my wife was like, SubhanAllah, look at some of these comments. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. One of the scholars, he said, that is, as long, people will never cease to remain upon good. So as long as there are people that like you and people that dislike you, that's just the normal way things are. Some people are going to agree with you. Some people are not going to agree with you. That's life. That's just the way that it is. It's okay. If everybody got on the post and cheered me on and whatever the case may be, I might feel a little uncomfortable with that. I'm like, that, and nobody going to disagree with this? I mean, there's a saying that, anytime you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time for you to, check yourself. It's time for you to, do some introspection, because you should never end up on the side of the majority. It's never going to be a situation where everybody loves you or everybody hates you. There's always going to be some people like this and some people like that. And as long as that's the case, we're good. We're good. I think we are in a better situation right now than we were, maybe 10 years ago. 10 years ago, people wasn't even giving people the salams. I probably wouldn't even been entertaining this type of conversation right now. I probably wouldn't even been talking about African American and black this and black that. That wasn't even my speech. If anyone knows me from maybe 10 years ago, I didn't even talk like that. I was so out of touch and so detached from my own social dynamic. It was ridiculous. Simply because that wasn't the order of the day. That wasn't my orientation to Islam. My orientation to Islam was trying to be an Arab. That was my orientation to Islam. You can talk about what went on amongst the Sahaba. You can talk about what went on in 13th, 14th century Islam, and that could be your reality. But the moment you start talking about African Americans and our current situation and what's going on in our present day circumstances, you would consider to be, astray, or you can, I've learned to sleep with that comment, I'm astray. Sister made the comment about me, just a couple of days ago. It's like, his deviant behind. You can say whatever you want. I've learned to live with, I sleep with those statements, so it's cool. I don't lose one iota of sleep. You can scream from the rooftops, but it ain't going to change anything, man.
All right, mashallah. Thank you again for that elaboration. Right now, I'm just going to turn some of the questions over to my co-moderator, Yusuf Abdul Jalil, who's still on the line. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. I have a couple of questions that have been sent in. The first question is this. Well, I'm trying to read it. It's not really phrased as a question, but basically it says there's a brother interested in a sister, and he wants polygyny. Right now, he can't house her, etc., and he has proposed the idea of misyar marriage. Am I saying it correctly? You understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
The sister doesn't agree. Okay, alhamdulillah. The sister doesn't agree. She feels offended. Does she have a right to feel offended?
No, it's not. First of all, let me explain to you guys what a misyar marriage is. It's more like where the woman just basically pays for everything and the man is just there to provide, sexual, to provide the sex for the woman. When she has a need or she has a desire to be intimate, it's not considered zina because she's actually married to this guy, but, she's basically on her own. She pays her own rent, she lives her own life, and the only times he is really necessary is when she has a sexual urge. That is what's called a misyar marriage. It's more cultural, has absolutely nothing to do with Islam. In these type of situations, if a man proposes that, it just speaks volumes to where he is in terms of his spirituality and his understanding of marriage. And you just feel sorry for a person that's his reality. But there's nothing to be offended by. He was upfront with you about what he wanted, and you can decide whether or not that's something that works for you or it doesn't work for you. It's nothing to be offended by, but it has nothing to do with Islam. But it's not haram necessarily either. If two people decided to get married and a woman said, I don't need you to come around unless, I actually need some companionship or whatever the case may be, then you can come around. I mean, there's nothing haram about that, but that's not something that Islam promotes, nor does it advocate, nor does it encourage.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, I have one more question, and let's see. Any guidance on how to get my sons interested in Islam? Mother of my son is my ex-wife, non-Muslim. Any media about Islam that is geared towards teenage boys? They already know about Islam. I'm teaching them the deen. Want to find something that will really attract them besides lectures.
I don't know where the questioner is located. I mean, there's for each environment there's a different dynamic for each environment, depending on where you live at. If you live in certain communities or close to certain communities, I can probably direct you better as to where you can go, where they have a lot of youth programs and things going on for the youth. But it's in general, it's really hard to answer that question if I don't know exactly where you're from or where you reside at. That way I could kind of help you, navigate to where you need to get to.
The brothers in South Carolina, if that helps any.
Well, Sister Kimberly can probably help him with that. That's pretty much you guys, her area down there. Mm-hmm. I really don't know a lot about South Carolina. The community that I just went to in North Carolina, they seem like they have some programs and things like that. Quiet as kept. They made a pitch to me to come to North Carolina, but I don't think that that's going to happen. Nonetheless, I think that there's communities down there that and I mean that's another thing with our youth, man. Like I have a 14-year-old son. My oldest son is 14, and it's really a challenge to try to keep them in tune with the religion. At times I get frustrated because I'm like, dang, man, do you really even love Islam? Because I'm looking at him through my own lens, the way that my zeal and my enthusiasm and my love for Islam. And as a brother said to me, as I was in North Carolina just recently, and I was sitting with some brothers, and one of the brothers, he said about his son, he said, my son is 19. He said, but my son has to embrace Islam at his own terms, on his own terms, I introduced him to the religion because he was born in my household and Islam was, the order of the day in my home. He said, but as far as his relationship with the religion, he has to develop that on his own. I can't really impose that on him. He has to really find that. So, I mean, at this point, no, lectures is not going to do it. Lectures is just not, it's not going to do it. But you have to look and find out, what the youth are really into. Brother Boona Muhammad, shout out to Boona Muhammad from Canada. He came to America just recently, maybe a few months ago, and he did a nice piece on the hellfire and all of the things that happened. And he does a lot of poetry and things like that, but he incorporates the religion in his poetry. I don't particularly listen to him myself, but my 14-year-old son loves him. He loves him. And he did a poetry about it's on YouTube about all of the Sahaba. He mentioned in different Sahaba's names and going through each companion name and what he would do with this and what he would do with that, and Abu Bakr and this one and Uthman and this one, and it was really profound, But that's what I was saying earlier, that the direction that this deen is going into is something that many of us older Muslims may not feel comfortable with, but it is what it is. You can't change that. That's what they're into. You have these young guys, the Deen Squad, and they're doing music and they're incorporating Islam. I don't particularly listen to music, but if my son turns that on, I'm not going to tell him to turn it off. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not going to tell him to turn it off because I would rather Deen Squad over Jay-Z and Nicki Minaj any day. So, I mean, I'm not going to tell him to turn it off. It's the lesser of two evils. You know what I'm saying? You're being confronted with two evils, and you have to choose the lesser of the two. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not advocating that. I'm not promoting that. I'm not telling you that I'm saying that is what the youth are into. And I find that my 14-year-old, that is what he inclines towards. And he's learned a lot about his deen through some of those YouTube videos and, following up on them. And, so long story short, when Boona Muhammad came to New Jersey, just a few months ago, he asked me, could we go? We bought tickets, and we went. We went to, his show, and it was a very nice show. He talked about the hellfire and the trials of the grave and how we go from this life, transitioning into the hereafter. And, I took my son up and, introduced him to him, and, he was just amazed. And, for him, that was a lot. And it was a lot for me as a father who he knows that that's not really my thing, but because it's his thing, now it becomes my thing. You understand if that makes any sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thing. Now it becomes my thing. So the fact that we did that together, that's what's called a shared experience. So that's something that we could sit down on the couch and say, yo, you remember we went here, we went there, and, and it wasn't necessarily for my benefit. It was for his benefit, but it was also for my benefit because that is what keeps him connected to the deen. That's his experience with Islam. That's not mine. You know what I mean? But that is his experience with the religion. And I got to respect that. No matter how much I may dislike it, no matter how much I would much rather him sit at the feet of a scholar and learn Islam the way that I did, but that's my orientation to Islam. That's my experience with Islam. And I can't impose that on my children. I can't do that. It's not fair.
Alhamdulillah. Kim, you got any more questions?
I don't believe so at this time. We have posted everywhere if anyone had questions to send them in. I haven't received any others. So unless there was anything further, we can go ahead and close it out. And I just had a few more remarks, Brother Imam.
No. Yeah, well, I have something I wanted to mention first, Kim, before you
go ahead.
In.
Okay.
It was in regards to something that you had said earlier, Shadid, in regards to the women's movement. The women's movement was basically founded by a woman by the name of Gloria Steinem. A lot of people don't know this, but Gloria Steinem was a CIA agent. And the whole reason for the feminist movement was to break up the Black Power movement. So recently in an article on the Huffington Post, August 7th, what was that? When is August 7th? That's today? Yeah.
Yeah,
she put up something. Yeah, she put up something. I'll send you the link. But she basically attributes that black women invented the feminist movement. So the whole notion, I laugh too. But it's like the whole notion of this feminist movement. She's pitting on black women because she aligned herself. She aligned herself with a woman by the name of Dorothy Pittman Hughes. And basically that's where the whole, I don't know if you've ever seen this photo, but it's like an old photo, and it's like this white woman with her fist up, and it's this black woman with a afro up with her fist up, and that's, that was like the trappings of the beginning of the feminist movement.
Right.
The whole reason for the feminist movement, Gloria Steinem was a paid CIA agent who was at first sent to spy on Americans abroad, but then when she brought the whole thing with Us Magazine, I think it's Us Magazine, not Us Magazine, Women's Magazine. I have to look the name of her magazine, but she was able to get funding for a magazine and all this type of stuff to push this movement. But it was really through black women and the disenfranchisement of the black family and to break up the Black Power movement. So that was the first thing I wanted to touch on. Something to do some research for your book that you were talking about that might be of some help.
Absolutely. Thanks. I appreciate that. Absolutely.
Alhamdulillah, not a problem. I'll be sure to send you the link. Another thing that you spoke on in regards to people who are putting up masks when it comes to the initial introduction of Muslims. It's like, what's that saying? You put your best face forward, or when you're meeting people. And, a lot of times we, as Muslims, since we don't go through, the necessarily sanctioned channels, through Wali or Wakil or anything like that, you have people who are able to present their representative as opposed to representing who they are. You know what I mean? I coin it as holding somebody emotionally hostage. Because here it is, you're putting on the guise of someone that you want to be just to grab this person. But as soon as, you have them, then you change the script. So that was just one thing. And another thing I wanted to speak on right quick, or just touch on, that you spoke about, with marriage. You're talking about how marriage has changed in the past 5 to 10 years. But yes, there is, I feel personally, and maybe you want to speak on this later, but I feel like there is this, not institution, but there's this thing where we shame people into getting married. It's like, marriage is half of your deen. All these sisters out here ain't got no brother, so-and-so, or a sister will just take her shahada, and the first thing that sisters want to do, well, I don't know about now, but I know how it was, before she even learns al-Fatiha, they trying to get her married off. So
right.
I mean, I think that this idea of shaming people into marriage, especially with not having the marriage counseling in session, or imams at least having some type of instruction in marriage counseling, or even telling the need of it. I think that's something that that has hurt us as an ummah, and that's
Absolutely.
something that also attributes to those that demographic of women that you were talking about, who are in their mid-30s or whatnot, not have these kids, and have absentee fathers, and then they're taking out their enmity on anybody that they
right.
that they can.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, even for those women, I mean, they need to heal too. I mean, if they can create sisters groups and just help them to kind of, because what happens is there's no outlet for them, so they use Shadid Muhammad, they use my Facebook page whenever a post comes up that seems controversial, and then they use that post, or they use that outlet to, just kind of vent out all of their frustrations that have been pent up about previous situations. I mean, you can read the comments and see where that is coming from a place of pain. The comments are just so, malicious, and they're so darting, they just, throwing daggers. You know what I mean? You can just read through it. I mean, I can look at a person's comment and just see that it's coming from a place of hurt and from pain. And I mean, a couple of sisters I had to literally block, from, some of the admin that run the page. They literally had to block them because it's just, it was just really disrespectful, and it's just like, you need to find some place where you can heal, because you are self-destructive. You're self-destructive, and your behavior is inappropriate. It's really not that serious for you to get on a Facebook page and let the whole world see, how frustrated and how upset and how repressed you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, you need to go find a way to heal, a healthy way, because this is not healthy, for a sister to get on there. And I mean, I didn't even post, the thing that I put up. I screenshotted it, but I just, whatever reason I didn't post it, but I have it. And, just the comments was just like, astaghfirullah, man. You almost think that you're not even talking to, that this person is not even a Muslim that is talking. Islam just goes completely out the window. And you're saying, as I put in my post at the end of one of my posts, that don't ever get so bitter that you forget how to love, that you forget how to be compassionate, that you forget how to be understanding, that you allow your bitterness to consume you to such a degree that you don't even know what love is anymore. And that's, it's not fair to the people that are around you, and it's not fair to you. You know what I mean? That is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, between male and female, is love. And this is what I was saying with African American women. Stop letting your hatred of men, of your men, get you to a point where you start spewing these comments of, one sister was like, tell the brothers to stop going after sisters that got money, tell them to stay in a broke lane. And I'm like, subhanAllah, like where did that comment come from? I'm always the type of person that looks like, where is this coming from? You know what I mean? I look past the comment. Where is this coming from? And it's like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and I'll end with this. He said that, He created, from Adam, his own mate. And then he placed between them love and compassion and mercy, And indeed, this is a sign for people who reflect. So naturally, between man and woman is love and compassion. When that compassion is gone, the love is gone, and you no longer have love in you anymore, you no longer have compassion in you anymore, you're not even a full human being anymore. Because that's part of your makeup. That's part of your. As women, you guys are naturally nurturers and compassionate and loving. And when those elements, when those qualities are taken away from you, you have been reduced to a man. And if no man is good enough for you, then you spend the rest of your life single, or you decide to choose an alternative lifestyle. That's just the end result. Which is what I was saying about, the different movements that have come through, like the Black Panther movement and even, fractions of the Nation of Islam. Like a lot of those women today, right now, are hardcore feminists, and many of them are lesbians. I know personally women who were in the Black Panther movement who are lesbians, many of them.
Angela Davis.
You got. Yeah, Angela Davis, Asada Shakur, she's gay as well. Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother. I mean, these women were part of the movement. They were part of that movement. You have many women who, left the Nation of Islam. They joined, other movements or whatever, and they kind of went from one thing to the next, until eventually they found a home in, feminism. Feminism welcomed the men with open arms, you know what I mean? And as a feminist, I don't really understand how you can be married to a man as a feminist, because your job as a feminist is to, to do away with the man's role and to, replace him with you. So, and if we're not careful, we don't address these things early on, these things begin to fester. When you look at shirk, there was 10 generations between the creation of Adam and Prophet Noah with no shirk. There was no idolatry in those first 10 generations. And then along comes Shaitan. And, when these righteous people died, when their scholars died, he came to them and said, hey, listen, why don't you, make some idols, to commemorate them? And we still do that today. The Lincoln Center, you got a big, idol statue of President Lincoln. Over here, you got a big statue of this one and that. We still do that. We have remnants of that even today, where we commemorate. We just built one Martin Luther King, right? You just in Atlanta, right? You just, in D.C. They have these things. They built these idols and as a means of commemorating these people, these great people. And then along comes Shaitan generations later and say, hey, listen, prostrate to these idols because your forefathers. But you see, Shaitan is patient, and things start off real subtle. And so when I started seeing posts about, these brothers are this and these brothers ain't that and these brothers is this, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, you guys are, going down a dark path that you don't really see where this is leading. Because if that resentment turns into hate, because women don't let stuff go. Understand that. Y'all hold on to stuff. That's one of your, that's your curse. You hold on to stuff. You don't know how to let stuff go. Me and Jalil could have a problem, and 2-3 weeks later, we learn how to work that out, or we'll find a middle course where we can function. But women, y'all hold on to that for life. So when you talk about emotions like resentment and hatred and things like that, you have to be balanced with that. Even in our deen, we're taught to be balanced with those emotions because they can be very dangerous. They can be very self-destructive. Ali ibn Abi Talib, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, love the person you love in moderation because the one you love may one day have to be the one you hate, and hate the person you hate in moderation because the one you hate may one day have to be the one that you love. So this black man that you hate so much, one day you're going to have to love him. When you realize that, you don't really have you don't really have it like that outside of your race. Like, there may be a few people who kind of slip through the cracks that get married from, people from other races, but the vast majority of African-American women, are going to get married by, to African-American men. Make no mistake about that. There may be a few that slip through the cracks, but they are an exception to the rule. They are not the rule. It's important that, we see things, we're forward thinking and that we see things, before they actually begin to manifest. And that's the job of a leader. The job of a leader is to see things before everybody else sees them. You know, and unfortunately that's a blessing and a curse because he gets crucified for it, and then people don't realize until years later that, hey, he was on to something, right? You know what I mean? Like, you know, Malcolm X was saying that, you know, Elijah Muhammad was not the messenger of Allah. You know, he was not the messenger of God. And he was killed for that. His life was taken because of that. And years later, you know, today, many of the people who, you know, was rooting for his death don't even believe the same things that, you know, they used to believe in, you know. And unfortunately, he lost his life for that. You know, and that's typically what happens with people who are forward-thinking. But I think if we're all collectively forward-thinking and, you know, trying to stop things before they reach, you know, reach a place where we can't stop it, then, you know, inshallah ta'ala, we'll all be on the same page. And, you know, I want to thank you guys for, you know, coming out. I know I can be long-winded, but I think it was necessary. And I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to find a way to heal with all our ills, with all of our, you know, with all of our problems, with all of our dysfunction, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to find a healthy way to heal. Allah brought us to Islam with all of the dysfunction that we have as a people. He allowed us to, you know, embrace this religion, you know, and there's hikmah behind that. There's a wisdom behind that, because it shows that no matter how dysfunctional people are, the Quran, the greatest miracle that has been given to any prophet, has the ability to heal. The Quran, Allah says, is a shifa lima fi sudur. It is a healing for that which in the hearts of man. This Quran is a healing. You know, we just have to embrace it. We have to embrace it and stop fighting it. Stop trying to make Islam be what we, you know, what we want it to be, and allow Islam to be what it is, and just embrace it wholeheartedly. You don't have to you know, like it. You know, I'm sure that, you know, there's certain aspects about Islam that people find, you know, a bit difficult, a bit challenging, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay, but it's still part of our religion, and I love it. Covering might be a challenge for many sisters, but don't fight against covering. That's part of our deen. And you love the sisters that wear hijab. You love the sisters that wear niqab. That's part of our religion. I'm not going to make mockery of you because that's something that I'm struggling with. You know what I'm saying? Polygyny, you know what I mean? It's a beautiful institution of marriage. It may not be for me, and it may not be something that I want for myself, but I love and I respect the couples that are in polygyny that are doing it the right way, according to the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, legislated. So, you know, you don't have to like something, but we accept everything in the religion wholeheartedly, and we love it. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in ending, he said that success or weakness of faith, who is pleased with Allah as his Lord, Islam as his deen, and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as his messenger. He will taste the sweetness of faith. And, you know, we're yearning. We're yearning for that right now.
Alrighty. This is Kimberly Kalima Songstress, and I just want to thank you so much again for your time, for your generosity, for your wisdom and selflessness. We had, at the height of our call, about 54 or 55 people who actually joined in and were able to really listen to yourself offer clarity to a lot of the posts and your way of thinking and your endeavors. I want to say also that when you came to Charlotte, it was a nice thing to see that some of the people that came out were from all different communities. There was Imam W.D. Muhammad community there. There was Salafi there, it was Sunni there. It was a beautiful thing, and I think you're using a broad stroke, reaching the entire canvas of the Ummah. So before I let you go, if you would, you're everywhere, and I would just like anyone on the call who would like to listen to your lectures or find out more about you to be able to find you. And as I mentioned at the start of the call, you still have the Mardia Show on YouTube, and if you could tell us about your Twitter, your SoundCloud, your Facebook, and your Downtown Hot Radio, and your public email, and exactly what you answer in that. And then we'll be glad to let you go back to your family.
Okay. So the Mardia Show, we have a Twitter page for that, and we have a Facebook page for that, and we have a specific YouTube channel for that. As a matter of fact, we have an episode that will be released tomorrow with Sister Nisa Muhammad, and we're talking about divorce, necessity or excuse. That's the title of that one, and I had Sister Nisa Muhammad from D.C. that came on and talked with me a little bit about, and she shared some very, very nice jewels for both the brothers and the sisters inshallah ta'ala, look out for that tomorrow, inshallah. So if you go to the Mardadia Show channel on YouTube and you subscribe to that page, you should get an automatic email or update once we upload another video to that. As far as my Twitter account, I have a Twitter page, Shadid_M76 at Twitter.